Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into Robert Cialdini's absolute classic, Influence. We're going to break down the hidden psychological forces that kind of nudge us into saying yes, and more importantly, how you can start to recognize them in your own life.
So let's kick things off with a pretty strange story. A friend of the author owned a jewelry store, right? And she was having the worst time trying to sell this one collection of turquoise jewelry. I mean, it's the middle of tourist season, the shop is packed, but nobody is touching this stuff. So, totally fed up, the night before leaving on a business trip, she scribbles this note for her sales staff. Everything in this display case, price times 1/2. But when she gets back a few days later, every single piece is gone. The wild part? Her employee misread the messy handwriting and accidentally doubled the price of everything.
So what on earth happened here? Well, this is a perfect example of a powerful mental shortcut. Cialdini calls it a click-whir response. See, the customers were mostly well-off tourists who knew basically nothing about turquoise. So their brains defaulted to a simple rule: expensive equals good. That high price tag acted like a switch, click, and the automatic behavior, whir, was to buy it.
The thing is, our reliance on these little shortcuts makes us, a bit vulnerable. And the first weapon of influence we're going to look at is one of the most powerful because it's so subtle: the contrast principle.
The whole idea is simple. We don't judge things in a vacuum. Our perception is all about comparison. If you lift a light box and then a really heavy one, the second one feels way heavier than it actually is. And this applies to literally everything, including how we see price tags. And let me tell you, retailers are masters of this. They will always try to sell you the most expensive thing first. Think about it. A $95 sweater on its own? Kind of pricey. But what if you just agreed to buy a $500 suit? All of a sudden, that sweater doesn't seem so bad. It feels like a total bargain in comparison. And once you see this, you see it everywhere. Car dealerships get you to agree on the big $15,000 price of the car before they start suggesting a few small add-ons. And real estate agents, they'll deliberately show you a couple of run-down, overpriced setup houses first, just so the house they actually want to sell you looks like an absolute palace. Okay, let's dive into the next one. This rule is so powerful, so deeply wired into us, it's pretty much the glue that holds human society together. It's the principle of reciprocity.
The rule itself is super simple. We feel this incredibly strong obligation to give back to people who have given to us. This isn't just about being polite. It's a fundamental part of being human. It's what allowed our ancestors to share food and skills, creating this sort of web of obligation that made civilization possible.
There's this fantastic experiment that shows just how powerful this rule really is. So, a researcher named Joe pretends to be a fellow participant in a study. In some cases, he leaves during a break and comes back with a Coke for the other person, a completely unasked-for favor. Later on, he asks that person if they'd be willing to buy some raffle tickets from him.
And the results? Absolutely wild. The people who got that surprise 10-cent Coke, they bought twice as many raffle tickets as the people who got nothing. That tiny, simple favor ended up producing a 500% return on investment. But here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers also tracked how much the participants actually liked Joe. And you'd think that would be the biggest factor, right? Nope, it didn't matter. If Joe gave them a Coke, they felt they had to buy his tickets, even if they said they didn't like him. The rule of reciprocation was just too strong. It completely overpowered their personal feelings.
So, what happens when you take this incredibly powerful rule of reciprocity and you combine it with the contrast principle we talked about earlier? Well, you get an even more sophisticated technique, a master tactic called rejection, then retreat.
Cialdini tells this perfect story about it. He's walking down the street, and a Boy Scout comes up and asks him to buy $5 tickets to their annual circus. He politely says no. Then the Scout says, well, if you don't want to buy any tickets, how about buying one of our $1 candy bars? Cialdini bought 2, and only realized later that he doesn't even like chocolate.
See what happened? The Scout made a big request, got rejected, and then retreated to a smaller one. That retreat felt like a concession, and when someone makes a concession to us, we feel this powerful urge to make a concession in return by saying yes. In one study, compliance tripled when researchers first asked for a massive favor, volunteering for 2 years, and then retreated to asking for a single 2-hour commitment.
And this isn't just about candy bars or zoo trips. This tactic can have monumental history-changing consequences.
The infamous Watergate break-in was finally approved as a cheaper $250,000 plan, but only after two much more extreme million-dollar proposals involving things like kidnapping were shot down first. The final plan seemed almost reasonable by comparison.
So, when you're up against these really powerful psychological forces, what do you do? Are we just doomed to be manipulated? How do we defend ourselves without just shutting down and becoming totally cynical?
Well, the answer isn't to just reject every kind offer that comes your way. That would be a pretty miserable way to live. Cialdini argues that the real key is just awareness, learning to spot when a supposed favor is actually a sales trick in disguise.
So here's the defense, and it's actually pretty simple. Go ahead and accept the initial favor. But if the person then tries to sell you something, you just have to do one quick thing in your head. Redefine what you received. That wasn't a gift, it was a sales tactic. And the rule of reciprocity says you should repay a favor with a favor, but it says absolutely nothing about repaying a trick. And just like that, you're free to say no, totally guilt-free.
Once you know this code, you start seeing it everywhere, from the free samples at the grocery store to the free trial of a streaming service. These principles are always running in the background of our lives, but by understanding that click, we're in our own minds, we can start making more conscious choices about when and why we actually want to say yes.